Today on public safety, and we'll roll into, assuming we have time, some of the basic services, specifically energy and the provision of our electric utility here in Alexandria, as we warm up toward the State of the City address, which I still, as said yesterday, would plan to do post-council meeting this coming Tuesday, unless it interferes with the council and we need a different date. That would be more the formal address to you all at that point. And we still plan to do a State of the City series where we go around and look at things visually, physically, things that have changed and things that we've accomplished and done. In this first public safety one, that first slide you'll recognize, other than the change of date, was part of what was published and is online now under the Transparency tab. That first statement is a statement that is sort of our philosophy about what we are trying to do. Oftentimes people think of the fundamental right side of crime as only from the defendant standpoint, that a defendant is recognized constitutionally with rights to be tried a certain way, to have counsel and all those things, and those are critical. And both in my capacity and training as a lawyer, I strongly believe in it. I believe in it as a matter of my own philosophy, that people are entitled to defense, et cetera. But sometimes lost in that is the other side of the equation, which is what are the rights of victims, what are the rights of citizens? And I really believe that you have a fundamental civil right to be secure and safe in your community. And we know that there are many factors that cause crime, but we can't allow those things to rule our city. This slide I've gone over with you before, so I won't read it verbatim, but as we talked about a little yesterday with our approach with media and the things we need to do to make sure that relationship is better, particularly with KLB and functioning in a way that helps us get information out, helps us inform our public. We gave a specific example yesterday. That example was if there is a perimeter at a scene and citizens who are now more and more armed with their own technology to go and film those things, how do we resolve those things if they could cause a safety issue for officers? And we talked about we're going to have to do that job, and we talked about how it can be unfair, again, to a traditional media source like KLB to be expected to be everywhere at once, which is impossible, while others may have friends and people that just go around and catch it by happenstance and put it on and are not trained as media, do not have the understanding and respect of things that need to occur in those scenes that could be really dangerous. But the most important thing is keeping those officers safe. So yesterday I mentioned that in that relationship with media, there has to be respect for when officers set a perimeter. But on the other hand, there has to be absolute respect by the officers to protect the First Amendment rights of media and others to see what can be seen, but not interfere with officer safety or inform criminals, because that can happen today. If someone is irresponsible, they could literally be publishing live an event that could jeopardize officers or jeopardize the public around it. And I gave the specific example of the South Circle incident as one that turned out, for lack of a better way of putting it, not with any catastrophe and a mental health crisis, but could have been much worse. So here again, you see that again. Don't misunderstand. I believe that policing has to be constitutional. I believe, and we talked about the power of these, that they are great equalizers, and that the media's role in American life has been to uncover some of the most grave failures of government. And that is important and critical. And it's especially critical in policing. And our police, our guys, are not scared of being held to constitutional policing. They welcome it. They want it. And with that said, we still have to stop the lawlessness. And so what do I mean by lawlessness? I mean down to throwing trash all over the city, which, as you know, has become a pet peeve of mine at a very high level, because I think it leads to so much other trashing of the city, attitudes about the city, et cetera. We talked about other things that are multifactorial that aren't just heavy crime, small things that really lead to that broken window theory of the city. One of those is, while we're exercising the corporal act of mercy of feeding the hungry, making sure people have a good hot meal, we develop from that a trail from one institution that is our, God knows best, at getting people fed every day, providing that hot meal to anyone who comes, no questions asked. But then there was a trail of white styrofoam containers from that institution, which we love, all the way to my favorite Select whatever hotel over next to the pizza spot. I hate to name other businesses, but anyway, that trash is there. I still am driving by daily to look at how that's being handled. We have reached out and tried to meet with management. We've been unsuccessful so far. If management finds out about this and comes to the council to challenge what is going on, I'd welcome that day. I can't wait to have that discussion, either in here or, as I prefer, in private, to go over what needs to happen. But that corridor of trash has to stop. That is not an appropriate way to have that business. I know there's long-term stay there. I know there are people that are coming in and working from out of town. We appreciate that. I'm sure those guys and gals coming in don't like what they're seeing either there, frankly. So, but look, not to pick on one spot, that trail is all the way from our friends on Lee Street doing their job all the way through the park, all the way down. Now, you'll notice it's not there anymore because our friends immediately reacted and have changed it. You also notice a very stark contrast of cleaning up litter on the corridor of Elliott Street Jackson at Bolton. That whole area right there is markedly different. That was from intervention by the chief himself. And so we talk about these things in staff and we go out and do it. We had talked a lot about media yesterday. I see KLB is here today and they're welcome and we're glad they are. We're going to talk about some whiteboarding and give you an idea of how we do things. And so it helps me to ask for what they want to see and we'll let people know what things we publish in draft forms and all that and what things we don't. So here's the statement. We'll move on. Sorry for jumping around on that one. We talk about root causes. I won't go over this because I went over it with you either last year or earlier this year, but you're going to see stats today that KLB has asked for and that we want people to understand. They, I think, probably in fairness, took it from the Rotary speech, Lee, that I gave, and we're going to talk about some of that data. And as I did today at the senior day at the fair, I gave a very short set of comments about it. I really believe that a 25-year-old, in a lot of cases, a 25-year-old male, in the circumstances which we'll outline today, has a maturation age that's much lower. And we've talked about at that Rotary speech and elsewhere in our data, which supports this, that there are kids in our society, in our city, who are being scratched into adulthood, if you will, at a very early age. And while they're seeing and having to deal with things that they should not be seeing or having to deal with, at the very same time, the coping skills and things you learn in a normal parent, especially two-parent environment, are not there. So while seeing things that make you face what adults face at a very early age, the coping skills and mechanisms in a home that you might have grown up in or we all wish to have grown up in aren't there. And so even all the way to the age of 25, particularly in males, you're seeing a maturation age that's much different. And the data that I gave is the Baton Rouge data and our data, probably off by maybe a year. They reported for KLB up to a 24. My cutoff is 25, but it's in that same year. And so what you're seeing in these homicides and violent crime, I want to be clear, homicides and violent crime, and by violent crime I mean grave violent crime, not just a regular simple battery, what you're seeing is both the perpetrator and victim being young, so 25 and under, 24 and under African-American males. And so Baton Rouge has that data. I would suggest to you that there's a lot of nationwide data that will be the same, but I'll focus on what I know and what our group is studying here, and we largely would mirror that Baton Rouge data. Again, perhaps off by 24 and 25, somewhere in that age. But it doesn't change my opinion of the data on what I'm telling you that maturation age problem is. This is just a reality. There's a lot of reasons for it. And here are these root causes that I would remind all of you again. These kids have a disconnection to self-soothing solutions. So an easier way to say that is that coping mechanism that other kids grow up having, that regular school, regular parental function, regular institutions of aunts, uncles, and others that can provide that, give a family member. The ability to self-soothe, the ability to go through a trauma or an issue and figure your way into a better place. I know that sounds so simple, but it is that simple. That's why it's called a root cause, because it is that simple. Disconnection to deep family relationships speaks for itself. That is, there was a time years ago when saying that when criticizing the absence of a father or at least a two-parent family, it may be much less traditional now, I would argue that the data would show that whether it's a non-traditional two-person parented family, having two people, having people in a family where there's a good guy, bad guy, there's an interplay between parents where kids can get sort of two sides and have to deal with it. The data just shows how tremendously important that is. And so that is not a knock on single moms who are having to work hard to raise kids. It's not a knock on it at all. It's actually an empathy toward it, that think how tough that is. Think if that mom is working and a grandmom's working. So the absence of a male in the home is not a knock. You don't have to be liberal or conservative to get or not get that. It's just the fact that the data bears out. And that is, so if you think about it, the one-offs of that and the two-offs and the three-offs are going to be if you're missing those parts of the family. And it can be a broken family. I came from a divorced family. There's a lot of issues that go along with that. But there's still both sides. And there's sets of parents and grandparents and others there that provided me with a support mechanism that, these kids are not getting that. They don't have that at all. A lot of times that deep connection, or in this case we say disconnect, but you see the deeper connection come back, Reddix, when there's a trauma. That's when you see it back. When someone dies. When at 15, 16, or again, 24, 25-year-old is killed. Bullying is another root cause. Poor, bad, external relations and influences. That's the one we all know, right? They're hanging around the wrong crowd. And that's the one probably a lot of times we all let, well, he's growing up or she's growing up. Maybe if I interfere, it'll just make it worse. I hear that a lot. I deal with it as a parent, right? If you interfere, you got to interfere as a parent. That is part of the job. Interfering, interdicting, intervening, stopping behavior, changing behavior, modifying. Necessitous circumstances and addiction, another root cause. Kids on drugs early. Just like an adult who has a need for the fix, so do kids. And they're, again, because of these other ones that usually are coupled with it on the left side of the screen, you've got even less ability to cope with the addiction side, so it gets even worse. Then there's some basic anger management, lack of self-control, and then there's finally just unreasonable expectations and desires. But those four, well, really the first two and the last one on that left side, I guess along with addiction, those are the things that are really driving what we're seeing here, what I think Baton Rouge is seeing, what we're seeing nationwide. And I only separate out addiction to not make it as important. God knows, we all know it is. It's because these other addiction, you can go be treated. You can learn skill sets to cope through that, especially young, and have a great outcome. But those first two bullets and that last one on the left, those are tough. And the longer you get past 15, 16, 17 years old, the harder it is to modify that behavior. So this is the challenge, and it is not an easy one, and we're going to see the data bear that out. Again, none of this is designed to denigrate a people or a community. Just the opposite. It is to recognize the community failure to help address this problem, because that's what it's going to take, Doc, as you know. It is not a single person, an elected official, a police force that can solve these things. It's going to take community solutions, and we're going to show you what Safe Alex can do to do that, what it's done in the past, and give you why it's having more trouble now than it had in the past. All right, so we're going to talk about community policing. We'll come back to it in a way, but I'm going to just always tell you guys, when we talk about community policing, the assumption we operate under at APD and in my administration is that is the paramount goal. That is what you are shooting for if you want true change in crime prevention. Crime prevention, so let's back up a second. There's a shooting, and let's say there's a fatality, and there's an immediate reaction. Oftentimes it's what is the mayor doing about it, or what is the police chief doing about it. If I could know where a crime was going to be committed ahead of time, particularly domestic or some of these other ones we talked about with the root causes, obviously we'd prevent it. It's really the wrong question, and it isn't to take any responsibility off me. I'm going to own what I need to own in this slide deck, in this presentation. But the idea that we would know where the next crime would be committed would be, if any community had that in their quiver of arrows, they would certainly be shooting those at everything. And we just don't have that yet as a society. We have hotspot policing from intelligence-led policing. We have what Safe Alex can do to help deliver hotspot policing better. We can look at where data already shows us crimes were being committed, right? But those aren't pure prevention. Pure prevention is the crime never happens because there was an interdiction made ahead of it. So what is my responsibility? Where it's to have interventions for kids, particularly at young up to certain ages. It gets tougher as they get older. The interventions certainly change, I'll say it that way. Those are the things we have to think about. But community policing can prevent crime, just outright. Why? Because there's officers in that particular neighborhood knowing the people in the neighborhood who know what's up, who know who's messing up, who knows where the problem is, who knows what house to be looking at, okay? So that can prevent a future crime. Community policing is the best way to do that we've ever known. And I always make this, allegory back to, there was a beat cop back in the day, and there was a box on a pole, and that beat cop had to go up to the pole, open it up, and they called in at the precinct, and they had a notepad. And now they can have way better technology than they ever had. They don't have to go to the box. But they still have to have those boots on that street, talking to people. And so what I'm going to come to, I'm going to give you the fast forward. Here it comes. We're not having the participation in Safe Alex that we need to give good data points on here's how it can work and what it can change. And KLB has asked about that, and we're going to unpack that today, and we're going to keep unpacking it. But we can show you where it worked before, and I'm not going to show you why it's having a struggle now. And it comes to one simple proposition. The neighborhoods and the people won't participate. Nobody wants to talk about what's happening. Nobody, and it's, you might say, well, Jacques, they're scared. They don't want to tell on somebody. No, it's past that. COVID, there was a big disconnection where people went home and stopped talking normal. We just see a big disconnect in what neighborhood groups are willing to do. If we go to neighborhood group meetings, we see two types. Really solid ones like Reddix has in his district who have no participation whatsoever, and the same people doing the work. That's A. And B, neighborhood groups that come around only every 2 years in the cycles of who's running for office when they become momentarily robust with political events and then go away immediately following the political season. That's what I see. I see it myself and know it to be true. That's not going to cut it. Either A or B is not going to help. So let's talk about community policing. Community partnerships, that's what Safe Alex is based on. Collaborative partnerships that develop solutions to problems and increase trust. I can't stress enough that last part. And we heard that when we came in. When we redid Safe Alex like it had been, the old way, our way, we immediately heard, Charles Frederick, thank God y'all are back, we love it, but we don't think anything's going to change. And so there had become an atrophy of that. It had atrophied to the point where there was a belief it couldn't work. Organizational transformation, that is the things we have to do internally and in the partnerships. Certainly externally, we can talk about from homelessness and all of these other things, there has to be a lot more coordinated effort. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Problem solving, look guys, I complain a lot about the technology and some of the nonsense that occurs with it, but I'm a believer and user of it. Certainly you can get information to people faster than ever because of it. You can solve problems, you can study your hotspots, you can engage all of these different things better than ever because of it. So there's always been a debate in community policing. Lauren and Chief Lampert, now Judge Lampert, all of us used to debate it all the way back, I suspect Chris before, all the way back to Cardwell, all these guys way back. When y'all first started it the first time, which I still say is the best it ever was, that first rendition, we had plenty of officers, we had individuals committed to it. There was still a debate then. Is it a division or just a philosophy? Well, it's both in the best world. It's certainly a philosophy that every police person should have community policing on their mind. But I will push back on anyone who said you just inculcated in all the divisions, you don't have a separate community police apparatus. I do not agree. I never will, because I've seen both, and one works way better than the other. But the best one, where you have a division dedicated to it, you remember these days, Chuck, they were on bicycles, they were everywhere. It's a man, think of the man or the human power it takes to run those. And so so what do you do in a world where no city can hire back to its original complement pre-COVID? We can be challenged by it, by everyone from the news to anyone else, but no one's going to get there. And the best in the country, my favorite leader, told me that personally, as I've told you guys. He said, Mr. Roy, you will never get back. You need to think of new civilianized ways to get to community policing. So we're going to talk about that too as we go forward. Our organizational structure, that's not very clear. I won't use it, but anyway, we'll come back. I've been over it with you before, but I want you to know it all feeds in, and one of the ones you can't see is Mr. Shannon Thorne, who's right back here, who's a master's educated person who is doing data gathering for all of us, not in community services, in our police apparatus, et cetera. And so he is a policy guy that is good at this, getting data and using it. I believe we need to measure things. If I tell y'all we're going to try a new thing and I'm not willing to put a measurement to it and say, here's how it's functioning or performing in a year, you should say, well, hold on, before we fund it, let's talk about whether it's working. And if things aren't working, we need to stop and do something new. There's nothing wrong with that. Fred Rosenfeld used to say that, you got to get up. If you don't swing the bat, you might strike out a bunch of times and one day you get the homer. He was talking about economic development. But if you want a grand slam, you got to get up to bat. So I'm sorry, but that slide's not clear. We have a lot of technical stuff in y'all's chamber that I'm working diligently to fix at the snail's pace of government, and we're gonna get there. Here's what we did. We did get to our incentive pay for officers. These are things I promised when I ran, and these are things we delivered. That sign-on was critical. There are two versions. We assumed the health portion. The council assumed the health portions for our police officers for 2 years with my recommendation in the executive order to do a 2-year re-up in all likelihood. I'm committed to do the 2-year re-up. That results in a significant raise just in and of itself. It's a huge amount. As we certify and do that, your other divisions get squirmy. They don't like it because they don't have the same thing. This was done in a clear declaration of emergency and need. This is being talked about nationally. These things have to be done within a division of particular unique need. That is a matter of declared fact for us, and it was a matter of findings for you. And it was the right thing to do. And while it may frustrate other divisions, that's not a proxy for not doing it. You have to do it to get people, or you have no chance at hiring. You're not competing locally anymore for officers. You're not fighting the sheriff to pick up a deputy or Pineville or anywhere else. It's a national deal. People look around, and frankly, people don't want to be police officers. Right, Chris? They don't want the job for a bunch of reasons. We did the 52 cars. The council did a record $3.1 million in operating capital and other items, but that's not the number. It's a larger number. We spent probably closer to $5 million. It was a massive amount that we've spent since coming back. There's no comparable time period that any officer can name. So we're doing the things we said we would do. And so when we look at this data in a minute, which you'll see some bright spots and you'll see some not bright spots, these things we said we would do, we're doing. But community police, we'll come back. All right, employing intel, we just do. The South Circle, again, which did turn out to be a catastrophe, was an example where I visually witnessed almost start to finish. Almost all the start, certainly all the way to the finish, what a good job both in intel deployed policing does and the use of equipment and assets that are needed. You get criticized for buying certain assets. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times that we shouldn't buy tanks, that they're paramilitary. You didn't buy a tank, as you know, Reddix. A tank is an assault weapon that is offensive. Its defensive attributes are to protect the people in it to be offensive. It has a gun and a turret on it to fire at things. The things we buy are defensive. They're not offensive, except to the extent that they get somewhere, get our guys somewhere safe, our guys and girls. They are defensive. They not only protect the officers in them so that they can deploy safely, they allow them the chance to communicate together as one team, which is not just best practice, it's the only practice. You wouldn't have people arriving at a different time trying to deploy a plan for a serious situation unless you wanted to ensure people died, both officers and innocent civilians. Also, it protects the civilians, as we know, right? It provides armor around which plans can be made and allows less than lethal force, Mr. Washington, to be deployed. So from those assets, less than lethal force can be applied and deployed against the assailant, which saves that person's life and the citizens around it. So the idea that those are tanks are offensive, that's just people doing nonsense. That's about one step away from defund the police, which is the biggest nonsense of all. It isn't about that. It's about funding things that matter, doing it right, being trained, having the right equipment, and having police officers constitutionally police. The idea that you would fund it less is nonsense, ludicrous. I feel like I can honestly say, because I talk to guys whom I trust and who don't give me what I want to hear, that the morale and engagement is markedly different. I also feel like that can change and wax and wane in a month, in the 6-month period. Lots of factors go into that. One event could bring the guys and girls down, if you will, right? It's just the nature of it. But I've seen it bad and I've seen it decent, and I've not seen it better than I did at least 4 or 5 months ago at the height of all these incentives. In all of life, it is a what have you done for me lately? We understand that. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but you got to be mature enough in this game to know that. But we just have to keep thinking about how to make their lives better so they can do that constitutional job better. Okay, data. again, you guys can't see it at all, so I will read. Maybe somebody can help me zoom in. Maybe I can clear that up. It needs to be seen. Let's see. Must have a focus too. Other way? But I can't get is there a way to make this more acute, this focus different? That's lighting? Ooh, that was bad. This is when I need KLB more than ever to fix. Okay, so, I don't know if I can hold it. Well, now it's stuck. Did it freeze?
Yes, you could
I made a picture.
hit the snowflake thing.
Man. Yeah, that's not gonna help.
It's the print.
It's just the print, okay. All right, we're gonna do victim first. Boy, y'all really need to see this. So 0 to, well, I mean, it needs to be seen by the folks at home. Y'all can get it today. So 0 to, we'll run the presentation separately. I'm going to blow this slide up. 0 to 15, this is victim by percentage, 2024, 2023, 2022. So 0 to 15, 5% in 24. 23 was 0, 22 was 0. 16 to 25 in 24 was 33%, in 2023, 50%, in 2022, 58%. So there's a bunch of other numbers, but I'm sticking to my 0 to 25 years old. That was victim, and I'll just go to by race and gender. Black males, 2024, 60%. 2023, 73%, 2022, 81%. And that's what I represented at Rotary and to KLB, and those are my stats backed up. Again, I'd footnote, I'd used 24 at Rotary following Baton Rouge and what I thought was our own data. I think the rub is probably 24 to 25 for Alexandria, that 1 year makes a difference. I also don't think it makes a difference for the reasons I said earlier on maturation age versus chronological age. In fact, it supports my point that kids are a lot older. They're adults who are older are more like kids in this instance. Okay, so there's your victims. You ready for perpetrator? 0 to 15, 0% in 24, and I'm going to give you this, so you'll just take it. 7% in 23, 9% in 22, 16 to 25 years old. 17% in 24, 60% in 23, in 22, 55%, and by race, 2024, black male, 73%, 2023, 88%, 2022, 75%. So those blended numbers for the 3 years supported the data I gave, both in here to you guys at Rotary and today. It's a little worse looking at it then. I think if you took 2024 and you add the 17, let's see, on perpetrator, 26 to 30, you get another 24%. So there was a little anomaly there. I have other data that I can give. I have some with some handwritten notes. They're public records. I'll be happy to give them. But, we broke down things by all kinds of different ways. I had Shannon break it down. And, I will stick with my original thesis to you guys, which is that illegal gun possession is the predicate. And I didn't build that data into it, and I think the media may want that as well. But also made a lot of comments about percentages of domestic versus non-domestic and all that. We'll be happy to unpack it. Domestic crimes cannot be predicted by us. The courts may have data, right? They may know someone that just had a protective order. All of those things may be there, and we certainly, Shannon, should be correlating that data at a level that no one ever has. But So what could you do? So we know that someone is a risk. You know, there's always been a saying, you watch Lifetime movies or anything else, the saying is always, a man will walk right through that piece of paper that says he can't go somewhere if he's after a woman. Extending that a little bit, if we have the data, the right of us in a domestic case where it's a TRO case, so they've not been adjudicated guilty, to go and, first of all, you would never have the manpower, woman power, people power to go follow everybody with a domestic order. So domestic is just, no matter how good you get on granularly knowing that someone's at risk, your ability to go do it is so hampered by resources that it makes it not impossible, but nearly impossible. You'd run into some constitutional problems doing that for people who aren't adjudicated yet of doing anything wrong. You can't predict domestic, is my point. And I'm saying that as a broad statement. It doesn't mean you can't unpack it. I get nervous when I see the media writing it, because as an isolated quote, it sounds like I'm making an absolute. It's not absolute, as we know. But guys, it's close. So domestic is just difficult. You can't know when a firestorm in a household is going to break open. You certainly can't predict and know that at a funeral where people are mourning the death of a young man shot, that there will be shots fired and another young man die over a fight, not over the issues that led to it, like retaliation, just over the funeral lasted too long and somebody got mad. This is a breakdown in our society, guys. It's a big problem. Okay, so this data we will be able to see. Now I have to back up a little. What a terrible example I'm being of using technology. All right, so these years you can't see them all the way through 23 or 24 here, but I highlighted them to make them bigger so you can see some important moments. I don't want to go totally by memory, but I think I may have to. Safe Alex proper was launched end of 10/11. Okay, so you can see some homicide, at least. I'm not going to argue causation here, guys. I don't want to bore everybody with science, but correlation and causation are not the same thing. I'm going to say correlation. No one should say that they can prove this caused that. But if you want to look at the correlations here of things we did, there's 11 when it was instituted. We felt like we had issues in this area, and in 15, I joined with Deborah Randolph, and if y'all recall, the council, we joined with the chamber and others and relaunched a heavier version. We called it Safe Alex 2.0 or Safe Alex Total, and again, you see a reaction. I'm out of office here by a year, and Safe Alex was stopped as we ran it. I'll leave it at that. You can decide what you want, but there's homicides. So no one can say this is causal, and no one can blame anybody else and say that, for example, the change in homicides in general is not somehow a reaction to, we have data, the police know this, that we have a harsher element of folks that relocated in Alexandria after Katrina. We know this, we see it reflected, and then I'd call it micro-generationally, meaning it's not a whole generation. It's just in the world of crime and organizing it, you're seeing some of that pronounced since that time period. So it wouldn't have happened that year. It's not like the next day. You'd see it 1 to 2 years out if you're being scientific. And that is what you see is a change in those homicide rates. And I'm going to show you that in a better graph, and I'll show it to you now. So there were homicides through 15. You will have seen that same correlation of us I don't have 2005 all the way there, but we can get you some other graphs. We're having to rebuild some of that data. I had a lot of that data, Shannon, as you know, before. When I came back, some of it, I don't think there's anything nefarious. I think it just is the storage systems, whatever has changed, and we're going to have to dig a little harder. But that was all crime. This is an important stat. So we focus on homicides because that's what you see on the news, and that's what gets your hair up and but you got to look at all crime too. So property blended in with other violent crime, and then you ought to look at property and violence separate. And we used to keep all that separate, and we're rebuilding the ability to do that. This is 2010 to 2015. You can see those are the main Safe Alex deployed years. I stand by this data. This is what I think you can do when you're properly moving. This was the only slide I showed, by the way, at Rotary, but it's not the only data I verbally said at Rotary. Now, for those at home, there's your solve rate on homicides right now. So that would be a great thing to brag about if it weren't about what it's about. I don't really need to say more. These guys are doing their jobs. Our guys and gals are doing their jobs. So if we go back to way in the beginning, we had our slide, and we look at that one, and we look at this one, we have to conclude, as anybody would, and we wouldn't need an expert to do it or a PhD, that if you're solving them and you're not doing enough here, or you're not doing enough, whether it's locking them up, having the capacity in jail space, which isn't a solution, locking people up is not proved. Louisiana locks up more than anybody. We still hold the record, and we're doing as poorly as we've ever done right now. So those are things that we have to figure out that are going to be different than doing the same thing over and over. That's a tough slide. It's great to brag about the guys and girls at APD and their partners in the sheriff's office and elsewhere, in Pineville as well. All of them work together. It's great to see that for your local departments, but the fact that people are so worried and we're having so much trouble with a portrayal of Alexandria the way it is, it just doesn't help. I mean, if you would imagine which is why I had such a long presentation yesterday about repartnering and figuring out how we can have a better relationship specifically and very calculatedly with TV media, because we need it. Who would go market this? I mean, this is not what I want to go say about how we're going to do economic development. We got a 90% solve rate on homicides. If I'm anyone else, I go, well, how many homicides do you have? I mean, the question isn't going to be about the solve rate. It's going to be, why are you bragging about that, sir? Right? So this is good because it means it's happening. But this is destroying a people. This is destroying neighborhoods. Not the solve rate, what's leading to it each time. These are retaliatory, and I have that broken down. I went over that a few weeks ago. We're seeing retaliation, domestics apart, but retaliation and gun predicates. People already on probation or under a gun previous crime, that's where this is happening. I think in the beginning when I was telling everybody it was young and you see the stats of 0 to 25, I should have been careful day one. I have been for the last year and a half, very careful, especially this time around as mayor, that when I say young, again, I don't mean 15. I mean 25 and under. That's young to me, based on the data we see in the maturation age of kids. So Safe Alex and Community Policing Reimagined. Look, the way Safe Alex works, if y'all go Google Dallas, Philadelphia, you can go look at places that are saying they're lowering their crime. Go look anywhere, click on the PDF of their plan, go click on your own plan and call me and let me know what differences you're seeing. We have the right plan. We are not getting community participation like we used to. I'm not going to go over every theory I have about why. I've gone over some. Some distrust, some the attitude of what difference will it make, so a hopelessness part of communities. You can have all of that you want. If we don't make a change, if there is not a change in that attitude, then it can't be fixed. So we're going to have to all be about that work. It can't be that you look at a presentation at home or now and go, well, I think some of that makes sense. Maybe he's right. And then you turn it off and you go about regular stuff. Everyone's going to have to roll up their sleeves and get into this. We have to have the neighborhood profiles. You can't only have a community neighborhood meeting group that meets every 2 years at political season, and you can't have a good one like the one I mentioned earlier that has 3 people attending. You know? We need to modify our plans as things change. I believe that the community compacts, which I've never been able to get people to do, are important. You sign a compact, a trust agreement with that particular neighborhood group of its needs and wants. It's obviously not enforceable in a court of law, but everyone is then on the same page, signing, this is what we say is important to us. In one neighborhood, it might be trash. In one neighborhood, it might be dilapidated housing. And in one neighborhood, it might be drug trap houses. You know, those might all be treated differently. In one neighborhood, it might be, we want boots on the ground. In another neighborhood, it might be different. But what it helps us do is when Deputy Chief Cooper and his guys go out and someone says, well, y'all were heavy-handed, we didn't want y'all in our neighborhood. You signed right here and said your number one, all of you unanimously said number one goal was that. By the way, in the black community or white community, flat out scientific poll, now this is absolute. What do you think the number one issue in Alexandria is? No matter what house you're in, it's crime or the fear of crime. Okay? And that does not differ at all much, depending on what house. We're all people, we're all worried about the same thing. A safe neighborhood, a safe school for our kids to go, and parks and other recreation where we feel safe and can play. This is another slide that shows it a different way. We have lots of slides on the different components. So safety component is what I've been focused on, but there's also blight that's related. We also are working on our getting people in better shape, getting people involved, our ALEC score. Skip Fox, Dr. Fox is working as recreation director on lots of different things with bringing back what Jeff, I think, was Mayor Hall was doing well, which was developing youth commission ideas. We had started and didn't, and he really championed that, and we're getting all of that back going. And so here's the money slides, okay? So everything else is leading up to this. This is new, and this is important. If I'm making my thesis that community policing is the solution, and I'm telling you how hard it is to hire officers, then you got to say, well, then what are you telling us? That there's no hope or way. What our guys have been working on, Shannon Thorne, the commissioner of public safety, and our team are community service officers. We're going to get these officers who are not police, but we'll go over, they have the training, and they're going to have lots of skills to go in there to be in all of our parks. We are taking back our city central park. I talked to a lady today. She said, Mayor, I used to go there. Yes, thank you. And the litter we are taking back how things look, how you feel being in those assets, and people are going to be able to safely go and use them. So we're going to have these community service officers. Right now, we have, from the legal budget and other things, I'll have it budget neutral for you guys on the council through major budget amendment, and then we'll use existing money, attrition in officers that we're not going to be able to get to hire anyway, and it'll remain, if not budget neutral, David, close. I think it actually will, which is not a good thing, by the way. The fact that it can be budget neutral to do all of what I'm about to show you is not necessarily a positive way to see the world, but it can be done. And I know you'd fund it anyway, but we're looking for ways to make it makes sense. So these guys are part-time, they rotate in, they have a uniform, they're recognized as having the authority to do what they do. They're going to be able to enforce certain city codes, other non-criminal police-related duties. Think of Safe Alex as separating the neighborhood part that Charles Frederick and his team have run and kind of double doing this. He's definitely been about the parks. But they will then get to focus on the neighborhood code enforcement assistance and all that they do, the intel gathering that they do. These guys are focused on making it safe where you are and reporting unsafe situations, intervening, getting police there if they need to. But right now, there's no one there. You can't pull people out of zones, chief, and put them just over at a park or at a business where someone says, well, my business is in an unsafe area. And you get tired of telling people your cost of doing business means you have to have security. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear how their business can be safer. So anyway, we think this is going to be a big help. They will not perform tasks legally restricted to law enforcement. They will not carry firearms. They will not have the power of arrest. But they will be able to do basic community policing duties. They will be able to oversee and monitor our parks with the authority to tell someone to leave. And if they don't leave, then they're violating a law and the police can come. They will have the authority to engage the community with outreach activities. They will have the authority to respond to mental health calls, which are, again, back to our promises that we would create ways to de-escalate and make sure when officers get on scene, either fire or these guys now can have told them, hey, look, it looks bad, but I think this is what's really going on. That saves lives. They'll have the ability to monitor and assist the homeless population. Create a presence and relationship with businesses, Lee, as I just went over about, hearing back from businesses like, look, I know you can't provide us security for a private business. We need something. And they can monitor special events, et cetera. Monitor and patrol the bus station. They can do some crime prevention through environmental design. That's what CPTED stands for. Help us look at places that need more lighting. Help us look at places that need a different color coding to make things brighter and easier to understand, all of those things. Roughly 17 an hour to start, 29-hour week. Again, non-sworn, there'll be 10 positions that are CSO 1s and then supervisors with a little more authority and training at 2s, and they'll be paid more than that, more than the 17. The requirements are pretty simple. High school diploma or equivalent, 25 years of age, citizen of the U.S., no criminal history, pass illicit drug testing, valid driver's license, pass physical fitness, pass psychological assessment. So that last one we treat like we do our officers. They're going to have to pass that because you got to know people you're putting in there don't have propensities to cause trouble themselves. They have to have that level. Criminal history. We talked a long time about listing that one. We would tell people if you have an extensive criminal history, that's probably going to hurt you doing this, but if you have some nonviolent, old stuff, misdemeanors, apply. You might not make it, but you might. I don't necessarily look at someone's very young age mess up as a reason that they can't have lived a life and shown that they're able to do things and get through that. I also assume people, someone that has a marijuana possession charge when they were young is not going to be precluded from a job under my standards, and that's just the way I would see it. Anyway, the slide's going to say what kind of things are there. Preferred qualifications would be either you are a former officer who is retired and would like to do it, or you're in social work or some related field. All of this will be published, so people will be able to get to it. See y'all yawning, I know I need to hurry. The training will also list, so you'll be able to see that right away. Tanya, when can people start contacting us about it?
We're waiting on HR to do the announcement,
So HR will do the announcement, but it should be coming up. Okay. So look, y'all are going to get some calls, councilmen and others. There's going to be people that want to do this. And so just encourage them to contact Lisa Harris at HR and go through it that way. They don't go through you, they go through HR regular, okay. And we'll see. We want to start doing this right away, especially with the holidays coming up. Next summer, we want to see people in our big park and in every park enjoying it, feeling a lot better, and take those back. Those assets belong to you, the people, to use lawfully, safely, and with fun. And the vigor that should go with kids out and being athletic and doing things. They should not be about four-wheeler contests and guns in backpacks. And they're not going to be, because that's over. So that's where we are. And we hope that this provides a very needed shot in the arm for community policing, and they're behind it. There probably was a time when my police leadership would look at me when I was last mayor and go, oh, you're replacing police. There would be a lot of pushback for this. I can guarantee you. None. They need it. They need the relief and help this provides. I would love to tell you we'll hire 50 officers tomorrow. We did make a strong push and still are, and we got a lot of guys hired and girls, and they punch out as fast as we get them in, guys, literally. They either have an issue with firing weapons, or so many people get caught by the matrix, our psychological testing to get in. But more than that, I think people, they get in and realize we just don't want to do it. It's a tough time to want to be a police, very. All right, so that's a whole lot of data. We're going to, 1:07. So this is my shout out, olive branch to KLB about how we produce data and what we do to help them ask for data in a better way. My notices for these meetings, I personally do. There are no drafts or anything. I make them in one, they're built from one document up. And it's just what I list for what I think is important. I believe it's important for me to have my own thing in that way, what I see from the staff during my weekly visits with them that are important, and then go about doing them. They tend to reflect what I think of the important issues of the day. I have multiple methods to let me know what you want to hear about. I encourage you as council members to tell people. He might address your exact question on air, but just send it, give it to us. I have been more structured in how I do these than in the past, when I would just sit and take questions for as ever long. And the reason for that is not everybody's going to be professional media doing it. Some people have different agendas. Some people want to come here and disrupt on TV or make it political. And we just don't have time for that. It's not that you can't handle it. There's no time to play at this. It's too serious. Maybe if things get in an order where we're all feeling better, we can spend more time on nonsense, but we don't have time for it right now. But I do want to show people how we take things from a policy standpoint. So this one was probably led by me personally and Shannon on homelessness. We have been about this for some time. I think the date of this, although there's no date on it, it's probably saved in I think it's August 26, something like that. This is fairly recent. So this would be a meeting. I can't remember everybody in the room, and I apologize that I didn't write all the people who were there, but I could probably guess looking around the room. Policy leader means Shannon and me. There are certain things that I assign a team to, so they're not usually me. It would usually be other people. This one is one I want to own. It might include Kay as well, but it's definitely Shannon, and I would say me is what that means. Meaning we're responsible for the primary formulation of this particular policy. So if someone gets in trouble for dropping the ball, it's Shannon and me. I guess you can say, well, how do you get in trouble, Mayor? Who's going to, Kay, I get in trouble with Ms. McGill's. I don't know any other way to do it. I guess now that I'm publishing it, then you can hold me to it. But this is serious, and it is a problem. And all of you know it is. And I hope you'll see how seriously we take the job. So this is probably a half-day whiteboard meeting where there are thoughts being thrown on the board, literally, and typed. So instead of writing it, it's being typed on a screen like this, live and modified as we go. We definitely are going to enter into a signage deal, guys, like y'all see in other cities, that warn people that giving at this interchange on the interstate is not such a good idea. And even there's been some changes in state law that will stop some of that, and we need to, because it is dangerous. It's not helping anyone, and it leads to it leads to making bad behavior sort of okayed. So I'm going to tell you that there are really human traffic situations where people aren't local homeless people. They're being trafficked, principally out of some big cities in Texas, but not only, locally too. And they're being trafficked here, and they report back, and they got to give their tithe to not a pastor, okay? And so that's a real thing. That's a percent. Then there's truly homeless people that we need to be about helping. There's addicts who are not really homeless, but may appear homeless because they're addicts and they're living in a terrible situation, right? There's all kinds of people that run along this continuum of problems. We had thought there were as many as 22 encampments. That number may have changed because the law allows some disruption of that, but I want you to remember, if you disrupt an encampment and disperse, that didn't solve the problem, right? But it is needed in some cases when the encampments become a danger in and of themselves, either by the lack of sanitary nature, starting their own sort of little town where the rules of engagement are not exactly democratic. There are lots of things that can go wrong in an encampment that goes awry. Some of these are highly technical, but, you know, every once in a while you'll see a term or a phrase and someone later in many years can turn it into something that wasn't meant. So I thought a lot about this, but vagrancy is not a word that we really use anymore. It's an ill-defined word in law and under the Constitution, and it's not something I would go out and practice using. Meaning, as the mayor, I would not go and call someone a vagrant or use that as a descriptive. The reason you see it here is it's a way for us to make or encode in our discussion something we mean. So we would not want to say, because it isn't criminal to be just out somewhere by itself. What we mean is, what are those things that would have been in this old, you have these on your books, by the way. You have a vagrancy ordinance. It's not constitutional, but it's on there. Vagrancy plus is our way of saying, what are the things that carry what you might have traditionally thought of as being a vagrant, plus, meaning there has to be another criminal behavior for us to make an interdiction. And so if it's drugs, so if I go in the park and we have the new CSOs, let's say, and they're in the park and someone is sitting on a bench, they're sitting in sort of a stupor, it's not great how they look. That's not necessarily behavior that the CSO can ask about them. Hey, are you okay? What's going on? But you can't arrest someone for that. They can sit in a park. They can sit on a bench. If they're sitting in the park on the bench and there looks to be fresh needles on the ground next to them and they're in a stupor, does that lead you to a little more suspicion that there could be more behavior to inquire into? That's the plus. So you have vagrancy plus but not criminal. That's the one I just described. You have a disturbing the peace. What's the line on that? What is the line on someone sitting still in a park but who may have lost control of themselves in some way, clearly are not in a good spot where children are playing by them and there may be a needle on the ground? If I put all those together, right, what is that? Does that get to a line that's crossed where an intervention can be made first by a CSO and then ultimately by an officer? Remember, the purpose of the park is your kids go play there. If someone is sitting in the park and clearly just had used drugs, maybe aren't at the time, you can't prove that it's their needle, you can't prove it's they're possessing it, what do? These seem like simple things. There's people at home going, what an idiot. You arrest that guy. Arrest him and do what? What room is there for that person when there's a serious person that needs to be in that spot. I mean, these are the realities of what we face. I don't like it either. It just is, and we have to deal with it. So those are the things that you'll see us setting up. We get a lot of pushback on closing time. As in particular, one person running for office this time says, I just can't understand, if I get on the council, we're not closing parks at 8. Yeah, yes, we are. No single council person is going to stop that. If the council wants to, by 4 votes, adopt closing times past 8, then you'll be responsible for what happens. We have a council member whose children witnessed this and quickly caught on and said, why do kids need to be in a park after 8 unsupervised? What does it do to, you know where you should be at 8 o'clock on a school night? If you're in school? I mean, come on, guys, I'm not an old I get it. I'm not, you need to be at home preparing to go to school the next day. You don't need to be unsupervised in a park at 8 or 9 at night where people who aren't kids may be preying upon people there or causing trouble. That's not okay. And again, we just got to put a stop to that. So 8 o'clock is not an unreasonable time to lock a park where there's not going to be people to run it. And you don't have the manpower to take CSOs or police officers to securitize a park so that 2 kids who might feel like playing basketball that night can safely do so. That doesn't make sense, because the more likely situation is kids or adults up to no good are at the park after 8. And again, kids in school should not be in the park after a certain time. Is 8 the magic number? I'm not pretending to know that today. I think it's probably right. We didn't pick it out of the thin blue air, but, we can tweak that at different times of the year. Light and dark, changes in seasons, we might can think about it, but generally speaking, it seems about right. So we want to have those closing times. We're not trying to incentivize people being in the park at 10 o'clock at night on a school night. Whoever is doing that and telling you that's a good city councilman policy doesn't know a lot about counseling. Okay? I hate to be tough, but I'm not going to mince words about it. That's nonsense. We can't spend time on nonsense anymore. All right. I'm going to set up some executive orders because I'm not a cynic. But the cynic in me on this particular issue says, if I wait to try to present in an election season, part-time changes for y'all to adopt in your code and all that, we're going to get a lot of nonsense along the way. So what I've got to do is protect kids right now while in school, heading into the holiday, and then we'll come back and figure it out. I'm just not going to load y'all's wagon in the election season with it. If I'm criticized for that, I accept. It's just not needed. So we're gonna set some of that up because there's a clear special governmental interest in doing so. By the way, we've been doing it. When we came in, lots of parks are closed. Our parks are open despite the folks running for office. They're open. What the person means is we close them at a certain time. So yes, if you go there at 10 o'clock at night, they'll be locked like they should be. Right, Doc? But if you go there when they're supposed to be open, they'll be open like they should be. We're back to remember the fact and opinion, right? It's a fact that they're closed. You're just not pointing out when they're closed. All right. Interstates, this new law is going to be helpful that we're looking through, but interstates and thoroughfares, we just don't want people panhandling and doing things there. I know we're talking about homelessness, and that's not the same as panhandling, but the relationship is very clear. The other is reserved for some other thoughts that we're still talking about and developing. They weren't written. I think if there's a note on it, I'll try to find it. But I think I just reserved that spot because we knew there'd be some additional ones under signage, which is where we were. Partnering, we've got to help our charitables do better in this partner. Everyone means well. Every church who wants to commit to corporal acts of mercy mean well. But Manna House is the principal provider of meals that we see every day. So if someone wants to check a box and say, my church is doing it this weekend, we ought to still think about a better coordination of that. Dismantling the networking and human trafficking part, I talked about earlier, I'll leave that at that. It's probably not something we would, necessarily unpack all the way and say what every strategy would be if it's security or police related, but we will publish it when it's done and say, here's the plan, because the public has a right to see it. Data mining, we talked about Shannon's role in doing that, measuring what changes are happening and how. Guys, we want to look at why here versus elsewhere. What all of a sudden made Alexandria so attractive for people out of town to locate and be homeless here? Have some theories. We want to study and see if they're true, and then we want to publish that. Housing, health, mental health services are all part of that continuum of care versus the corporal acts of mercy. What we mean by as proxy for real policy is you can't always let the fact that it's a corporal act of mercy to feed the hungry, which we believe in. I do. I know you do. Just end the discussion for bad policy about how we're doing it and where. Citations and policing, unenforceable versus less enabling. We want to make sure that we don't enable bad behavior, but we don't want to write tickets that are you write a ticket to a homeless person, what good does that do you? None, nothing. So these are things we're thinking about. This is a whiteboard, meaning this is stuff thrown on the wall that needs to be further developed. But I wanted you to get an idea that your leadership does this regularly. And then here are the ones that we didn't finish that day in August, at the end of August. So we're going to develop some more around that. Bus stops, panhandling versus ridership. I continue to believe that using our bus stops, no matter how much criticism you get or we get for it, in a way that hampers and obstructs ridership is not okay. The bus stops and the things that we do are about ridership. To the extent bus stops would be used as shelter, then we have a different problem we need to address as sheltering, not when people are not on the ridership. They're going there to disturb the ridership or just panhandle at that spot because they think it's an advantageous spot. What happens is it stops your ridership because they don't want to be there if someone's using the bench for things other than sitting and waiting for a bus ride. Importation, exportation of people is kind of related to the human trafficking, where people are coming from, balancing decency and morality. Checkbacks, null set, other voices. That means we need to hear from other people. We're not the voices on this. There's obviously going to be people who are much more trained and engaged. Null set means we spend time on all the ways we're wrong. So we would develop a policy, and then you see at the bottom, then we think of all the checkbacks of how we could be wrong. So you have your hypothesis of what we're doing, and then we go, okay, let's assume that we're wrong about it. What are all the things? And those are the morality null set. So these are things that we need to think about. If we change this and do it this way, are we hurting mental illness? Are we hurting drug addiction? Are we hurting people getting water and food, electricity? So those are the things that we have to reprogram back in to make sure that we're not doing the wrong thing morally. Any questions on that?
Yeah, one question.
Yes.
In your discussions, was everything discussed about curfews?
Yes. I might not have said it directly in here, but it's in here. Under the executive order. Yeah, so you already have a statute on curfew. I hadn't looked at it in years. I want to say it's 10:30 or 11 for kids under 17, somewhere in that. And so it makes sense that the parks would be closed at 8. We haven't enforced it because of manpower, but we think that, Mr. Washington and others, we've all talked about holding the caregivers. We need to have some responsibility being implemented with this. Okay. I'm going to leave this and give this to Donna for y'all to keep in your records. We're not going to have time today because it is already 3:25, but I'm going to show you this one that I think is important. I continue to get, I thought it was a dead issue that we had basically disproved it so heavily, but now that folks are running for office, I see it's reared its head. this idea that your restore ordinance was a loan, it's really defies logic to think that that could be anything other than what it is, a political ploy. This is the FAQ that was published February 20, so this is the first one back in 23. I was trying to think, I had that whole slide deck and all the thousands of ways we've explained restore, and I went back and found the first thing we did, Elaine, in there. It's kind of right there. I mean, account balances accumulated before that date and that were not paid off through a restore grant are on an installment program, because it's the money you owe. It's not a loan. No one gave you money and said you owe it back with interest. You owed all of it, but you got a grant. So we're going to break down, for those council persons who still refuse to acknowledge what it is and go to the media and mislead people, we're going to break down grants by district. And I've got a sneaking suspicion, I know, that in one case, a council person is on an apology tour about voting for Restore, and that person should be championing Restore for what it did in that district. Your utility is the biggest weapon we have in economic development, paying for police and all those things, and yet, there is your utility compared to others with an all-in cost right now. So while people are out there demonizing our utility for no reason, here's how it's performing. And there's no substitute for the wallet. There's your city all in. It's right there, third from the top, as we've been telling you for years. And there's your competitors, and you can look at your most local.
Tell them what that's for.
So that's not measured by us. That's measured not by the city. Your utility is also looked at by the council's independent auditor, approved by the legislative auditor. That's an audited product, which the administration and no one can change. And they look at that heavy. They go through your algorithm on the bills and apply everything out. What this means is the all-in cost for 1,000 kilowatts is that amount of money. So it doesn't matter what you say about anything about your house or anything else. That's just the all-in compared to everybody else's all-in. Your rate has not changed upward since 96. Excuse me, 86. Ask what has not changed since 1986, cost of bread or anything else in your lives. I suggest nothing. We made one adjustment since 1986. I did, and I lowered the electric rate. So that's all that's ever happened to the electric rate. This is the most misinformative piece of city business I consistently see as mayor of Alexandria. Something you ought to be proud of, which is your utility. We ought to be using as a competitive advantage. We ought to be talking about it every day, everywhere. Now, it was near catastrophic failure when I came in. It was in an existential crisis. It was almost destroyed. And I've already been over why, and it's in that same FAQ if someone wants to read it. It's all right here. Everything you need to know about how we got here and how to fix it. Anywhere else I win a national award for Restore except the media coverage got it so bad and so messed up and so wrong with no investigative reporting, no look at it whatsoever, when it's all in the FAQ, can be reviewed by audited statements. If media were serious, go hire an accountant and have them look at it. Here's the reality. This is something we should brag about. There's no backstory. There's no anything. This is just what it is. That's just what it is. You can take a bill and multiply this out for yourself. You can look at it. That was August. So you got two main components, right? Rate, which we said hasn't changed. That's the thing that you control as the council. The cost of the fuel to produce does change, but that's a commodity. That's an international issue. How do you do things to control it? You leverage and hedge by buying gas when it's cheap. Previously, for 4 years, no hedging. In the previous 12 years in front of that, lots of hedging. Now again, yes again. So you get gas when it's cheap, you keep a forward piece of that for the times when you need it. when it changes so you can kind of equalize and stop the spikes, right? That's one thing. Have competent people, make good decisions, invest in your assets so that they don't fall apart. Don't miss deadlines for mandatory plant upgrades, all stuff we experienced and have fixed. So that's where we are again. We told you we'd do it in an amount of time. It's a year and 3 quarters, pretty good on this one. This is one to brag about. When Pastor Turner, Larry Turner, took the mic the other day, said that, no one will ever believe that wasn't planned, but it wasn't. I was shocked he said, I kind of wanted him to stop, but, somebody's getting a bill, and I guess sometimes you kind of think about what it was or could be. This is a good thing. Nobody wants to pay any amount of utilities. Chuck Fowler says this all the time. You can't say that utilities are high unless you say compared with what? Other utilities. If you're just saying utilities are high, like in America, we think utilities are high. There's a problem with that, because if you compare America to other countries, you'd be wrong again. But yes, utilities are high. If you think of them as a function or percent of your bills you pay for other things that are fixed in your life, no one wants to pay them. But since we do, because we can't give them away any more than CLECO or anyone else could, that's where we stand compared to others. If someone wants to challenge this, bring your accountant and come challenge it. But if you can't challenge it, stop lying to the public, especially if you're an official, and stop, by all means, apologizing for something you ought to be happy about. Yes?
One other thing that we do not do is charge for restoration after storms and such as that, and all of these other companies do pass it on.
I had not thought of that one, but that is in fact true. Other companies will charge a fee for a minute after they restore power after a catastrophic event. We don't. I can't stress enough what it would cost you in demand charges to replace what we do with some other investor-owned utility. You'd be paying for every bulb that goes out public, all the street lights, all of that stuff is a cost that would be on the city. You would pay someone else. In addition to a demand charge, which is a fancy way of saying, you pay me this for the right to do business with me. Our demand charge would never, so if we're paying the amortization to pay off our assets, we're not paying a demand charge. Instead of paying a demand charge, we're paying off something to own it with, as I've said for many years, a sweet spot coming to us for a good while where these assets are paid off and still running hot. We're running all the time. We're in MISO, we're called on because we have efficient units. We still have units that would be considered in the fastest start technology in the country. We invested in gas and it paid off. Others invested in solid fuel and it didn't. This is something to brag about.
Look at their rates.
I mean, there's some tough ones on there, if you think about what that means to you at home. So this is just electric. I didn't have time to force Marcus to make me one on the others, but let me just assure you that if you look at our gas rates and our others, they're so woefully they're so wrong as a matter of the council who has not the whatever it takes to change the rates, that they're just staying there. I know you are smiling at me like he's setting us up now. Yes, I am. At some point, you must change those rates, and they're minute in how they affect the person at home, but they're giant in how they're affecting the city. You're going to have to do it. I know that someone's at home going, we got him. He's all about upping the rates. Get him out of office. Here's the thing. Your bond rating is tied to that, and you've been dinged for it since I've come back, not on my watch. In fact, there's grants, Marcus, and other things that we're no longer eligible for because the council, as rate maker, will not even look at its rates, much less adjust them. You won't even look at them. You won't even study them. That is not proper. You're going to get hit by the legislative auditor at some point for it, too. That'll be on you, not me. You have to look at your rate structure. you must do it. Y'all didn't see that one coming today. I didn't set you up for it, but this is why you get to look at it. Look what you're doing. Even if you changed in here, you're not down here. We've got to continue to provide the electrons to the house. And if you don't have any lines and poles and infrastructure to get there because you're not reinvesting in it and you can't borrow to do it because you can't get any money from anybody, that will be a dereliction of duty. So you just have to think about these things and get serious about it and know that you're starting in a good place. Would you like to be starting here than elsewhere on the list? By the way, others get to just go to the Public Service Commission and say, we need a rate change because of X, Y, and Z. They get it pretty easily. You guys are different because unfortunately, when you sit here and the public takes the lectern there, it doesn't work out for you so well. But at some point, the talk has to be had. And we're going to make it easy for you because the talk is coming in October and November when CURE meets again and starts to look at this. And that's why you have that commission. I would encourage all of you not to talk to the commissioners. You can, it's not illegal or anything, but I'd let them look at it so you can tell the public eye to eye, we didn't have any influence. We didn't talk to them at all. Let them work the data, let them see, and then go from there. Your internal resourcing plan, your resourcing plan for our assets is still in the money, so to speak, for a great period in the future. This is all the way back to when we did the OSP. That's why it's maddening to listen to people say that we have high utilities. That statement is so mean. High utilities compared to what? There's always compared to what missing from that statement. The media uses it, council persons use it, the public uses it. High utilities, the cost of high utilities. Your rate's lower than anybody's. Your fuel cost is way competitive because it's based on natural gas and resources that we get and hedge. So if you're saying high utilities compared to what, then they're not high. If you're just saying you don't like the price of utilities, I can't help you with that. We all feel the same way. But people have to pay their utilities because it's illegal to give them away. People think I can forgive utility bills. I cannot. I'm, in fact, the one person who can't. I'm the one who's designated go to jail guy if I do that. I'm not going to be that guy for y'all. I love you, but I ain't. As Charles Frederick used to say, I'll do anything for a friend but time. All right. So I'm going to end there. I'll take questions. I'm going to place for Donna the white paper so that y'all have a copy of the homelessness paper to look at. I'm going to put the FAQ, which is online, give it to her for the public to use as well. And this is August. We'll give you August to look at.
One other thing, Mr. Mayor, is just a simple fact, is when you get a utility bill from Alexandria, you get your electric, you get your gas, you get your garbage, you get your sanitation, you get your water, everything else, and you're comparing that to a utility bill that's generated by CLECO, that's just your electric bill. So you feel like yours is a lot higher, you're paying for a lot more. And when you add those other things in from the other entities where they're buying gas from a gas company and they're getting a garbage service from a waste company, you add all those things together, we really become even more attractive.
So what Chuck is saying, go figure. It's on the slideshow that is under the transparency tab on the city's website. It explains that. What is an Alexandria utility bill? It's a consolidated bill. It is not just your electric bill. It's all your utilities. So if you compare yourself to Pineville for a similar size rent house you may own at the same, you have to back out all the other items and only compare electric to electric. Anyway, I would just encourage people. This is online on the city's website under the transparency tab. I think there may even be a page called Every Question Answered. There's a what we've heard, and then under it are just all the things that people said, and then we go and answer those things. So everything that has come up, I guarantee you is in this. We have not found a new question that wasn't covered in this document. And I would encourage the media as well. The answers are in there. All the way down to what happened and the cost of the 10.8 million when we walked in. Within 30 days, I think the day we came into office, it was an astronomical number. I think 17 and 16 or so. But I would back out the 30 because it isn't fair to count your net 30 days. Those are current bills, so to speak. But all the discussion that we gave is right here from the auditor. That's not our opinion. That's what your audit accepted as would occur. And there's the 4 items that caused it. It was not, let me be clear, the hack. Okay? I'd like to blame everything in the world on that, but this isn't one of them. It's how you manage the utility. And now it's back in decent operation. Now, let's talk about things that we still have to fix with it. There's no question that customer service remains a place that we need to continue to do work. But the reason customer service got so out of whack is because of all these problems that made those folks so taxed, so having to deal with people. They have people quitting. They have people publishing things. They have people going on KLB to talk about the secret. I can't even, it's too much. But it's all a product of these things that led to those moments. And these things are now fixed. And we need to be in the customer service business, and people need to know that we're taking care of their business, and we're going to continue to always strive to do better. All right, anything else? All right, that's to set us up for what's coming. We'll have a talk with you guys after where we'll go through the data real quick. Here's where everything is, using your audits and everything else. And we'll talk about the state of the city next week as a result of that. I have not guarded optimism. I am optimistic about what we can do in this city without qualifying it. I'm optimistic about what we can do in economic development. And to give you a preview of that speech, what I want to talk about in addition to Nehemiah and our healthcare advantage we need to get back is I'm optimistic that the unfortunate geographic placement of cities below I-10 that has led to so much great for them forever has flipped because of the amount of storms that hit our Gulf. And I think that is a huge opportunity for us here to capitalize on being where we are. And I think insurance agents and others will tell you that if you talk to them, ask Myron and other people, they're going to tell you there's truth to that. They're hearing it in all the things they're going to, all the training they do, and it's just a reality. The cost of insurance alone is going to be a competitive disadvantage in some places that turns it into an advantage for us. Okay? All right, thank y'all so much. Have a great weekend.